The authorship of the book of Proverbs is traditionally ascribed to King Solomon, as are Ecclesiastes and Song of Songs. There is very little likelihood that he really wrote them, but legend tells us that he was wise. Remember the biblical tale of his decision regarding the child over which two women were fighting? But remember also that he had 300 wives and 1,000 concubines. And since these three accounts of advice and poetry are considered wisdom literature, his connection to them is kind of natural. So, as with other books of the Bible which are incorrectly thought to have been written by famous Hebrew heroes, Solomon gets the credit. Regardless, Proverbs offers a guide to better living. And it interestingly ends with praise for one it calls a capable wife, whom it describes in detail. On the whole, what it says is less sexist than might be expected of something written at that time and in that place, which was Israel about 100 BC. A time and a place when and where women were subservient to men, and the roles of men and women were very structured and rigid. To be sure, the wife is praised for the long hours she so capably works at her female tasks, as the husband would work at what would be considered his male tasks. But she is lauded by her husband and her children for being more precious than jewels, something which probably didn't happen all that often, and still doesn't. The piece also praises her business acumen, her charitable generosity, her respected wisdom. So she is one who is obviously listened to and possesses some power which was relatively uncommon under those circumstances. I was intrigued with how liberal I found this piece to be, especially regarding the implied male-female role structure. And Isaac compared it with something put out by the St. Norbert Abbey Press of De Pere, Wisconsin. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, in 1964. I've told you that some of the stuff I've saved for decades is saved with the expectation or suspicion that I would someday use it. It is divided into 2 sections and is titled Beatitudes for Husbands and Wives. Now, I know nothing about the St. Norbert Abbey Press or whatever affiliations it might have. So as I share it with you, I beg particularly the women in the congregation to not blame me and vow not to kill the messenger. Let's start with Beatitudes for Wives, and of course, you are invited to take notes. Blessed is the wife who keeps her home clean, but not too clean, for her husband will relax. Apparently, it is the woman's job to keep the home clean. Blessed is the wife who seldom complains, for she will most often get what she wants. Now that goes along with catching more flies with honey than with vinegar theory. Blessed is the wife who is not a nagger, for she will never be blamed for her husband's stagger. Now I'm having difficulty seeing what the correlation is between nagging and staggering, although the words do rather nicely rhyme. Blessed is the wife who makes her husband feel important, for she will be indispensable. Poor guy obviously needs a self-esteem boost. Blessed is the wife who does not find fault or criticize her husband at home or in public, for she will be a woman pleasing to both God and man, especially man, her man. Blessed is the wife who seldom bursts into tears, for she will have less cause for them. Another one which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Blessed is the wife who lives within her husband's income, for she will be precious in his eyes. Now obviously this piece was printed when most homes were one-income homes, and this income came from the man, and that it was somehow his. Blessed is the wife who does not dominate her husband or keep him under her thumb or henpeck him, for her home will be heaven on earth. And the males in the congregation will mumble, Amen. Do you suppose the St. Norbert Abbey Press is headquartered in a monastery? I have to believe it was monks who put this thing together. Anyhow, here are the Beatitudes for husbands. Blessed is the husband who is thoughtful of many little things, for his wife shall never complain. Blessed is the husband who is not miserly, for his wife shall be as a sweet-scented plant in the home. Blessed is the husband who is not selfish, for his wife and children will love him without measure. Blessed is the husband who is not a chronic gambler, for his wife shall have peace of mind. Blessed is the husband who maketh not his wife a sports widow, for he will be cherished even unto his old age. Blessed is the husband who is not a sot, for he will be esteemed even on this earth. Blessed is the husband who gives good example, for his wife and children shall not be scandalized in him. Blessed is the husband who loves his wife and will have traffic with no other, for he is a man after God's own heart. Sounds to me like the husband gets the better of it. The wife is expected to do all the housework, keep her emotions in check and her feelings under wraps, boost her husband's ego by catering to him in all things, not spend too much of his money, and pretty much act as if in all things Father knows best. The husband, on the other hand, just has to be considerate every once in a while, not be too big a cheapskate, avoid excessive gambling and drinking, not chase other women, and miss a few games on the boob tube. Yep, definitely written by monks. Today is Mother's Day. And I thought I would start off by having a little bit of fun with that list of male, female, husband-wife expectations compiled only 50 years ago. Now, to be sure, not every household reflected what I read to you. I know the one I grew up in didn't, thank goodness. But some of what the piece contained was fairly accurate to some degree. Well, times have changed, at least partially because of changing social expectations and economic conditions. Gender equality has become important, and gender roles are no longer so rigid and clear-cut. Many more households are inhabited by single-parent families. More and more husbands and wives both work out of the home, and household and parenting tasks are shared. Realize, of course, that here I speak of what is true in Western cultures and not necessarily throughout the world. Yes, the times have changed, but you know, some things remain the same even throughout the ages. And here, most appropriately on this Mother's Day, I am talking about the positive effect which love and support have on the development of children. Love and support from their parent or parents or from other adults when such parental love and support are inadequate or non-existent. So let me give you an example from the Bible, from the Hebrew Scriptures. Almost as if by accident, the biblical records give us their names, Amram and Jochebed. They are only mentioned in one or two places and merely as names on a list, not as people of any intrinsic importance or noteworthiness. They were slaves, you see, nobodies in the social order of things. We are told that they got married, and we must assume that they spent their honeymoon just as they did every other day of their lives, grinding on through the heartbreaking hopelessness and with the backbreaking labor which comprised their entire lives while enduring ever new welts on their backs from the whips of their unfeeling and unrelenting taskmasters. Their home was a slave's cabin, a hovel really, containing the bare necessities, and perhaps not even that. When the years of cruel adversity had pounded them to the last ounce of endurance, they died and were thrown into unmarked graves, remembered for a while perhaps by their fellow slaves, and maybe released from life with some minimal form of religious recognition and ceremony. Amram and Jochebed had 3 children, and it is because of one instance in the life of one of those children that they are noted at all. The place, you see, was Egypt. And these Jewish slaves of the Egyptians, suddenly feared because they were more prolific at procreation than their masters, seemed threatening. The rulers of the land declared that the male offspring of the Hebrew slaves were to be put to death right after birth. When her 3rd child came along, Jochebed refused. So she came up with a plan. She put her son in a basket and set him afloat in the Nile River at a safe place where she knew a daughter of the Pharaoh went to bathe, hoping that the young woman would not be able to resist helping a child in trouble. She was right, and as a result, Moses went to live in the palace as part of the royal family. Also, his mother was brought in to be his wet nurse and was kept on so that she later had a hand in raising him during the years of his childhood. Moses had an older brother and an older sister, Aaron and Miriam. There must have been a lot of love in Amram's and Jochebed's hearts, and in their household, such as it was, because all 3 of their children turned out to be pretty remarkable. After the trek from Egypt began and during the 40 years of Hebrew wandering in the wilderness on their way to the Promised Land, Miriam demonstrated her ability as a poet and singer, defining with her art what this experience was all about and giving voice to the hopes and aspirations of her people. Aaron was a powerful orator, able to move people with his words, and as a man of great faith, was appointed religious leader of Israel, and thus became the ancestor of the tribe of Levi, from which family came all of Israel's priests throughout the centuries. And Moses? Well, you know about Moses. Moses the liberator, Moses the lawgiver, Moses the general, Moses the prophet. Moses the man who spoke with God and brought his people to their holy destination. These, the children of mere slaves, did all that, and their parents have to take at least some of the credit. Are you a father? Are you a mother? Are you a mentor? Regardless of your particular relationship with the child, do you set an example that will stand him or her in good stead as they face their own futures? What kind of a household do you have in which children can nurture and grow, develop, and mature? Are you giving them what they will really need to succeed, the important and vital and necessary things, like love and support and encouragement and discipline and compassion? I want to close this morning by reading to you a short piece written by an anonymous mother, which is too bad, reflecting her thoughts on what she did with and for her children as they were growing up, and how she hopes they will understand her motivations and actions. She says, "Someday when my children are old enough to understand the logic that motivates a mother, I will tell them, I loved you enough to ask where you were going, with whom, and what time you would be home. I loved you enough to insist that you save your money and buy a bike for yourself, even though we could afford to buy one for you. I loved you enough to make you take a Milky Way back to the drugstore with a bite out of it and tell the clerk, I stole this yesterday and want to pay for it. I loved you enough to stand over you for 2 hours while you cleaned your room, a job that would have taken me 15 minutes. I loved you enough to let you see anger, disappointment, and tears in my eyes. Children must learn that their parents are not perfect. I loved you enough to let you assume the responsibility for your actions, even when the penalties were so harsh they almost broke my heart. But most of all, I loved you enough to say no when I knew you would hate me for it. Those were the most difficult battles of all. I am glad I won them, because in the end, you won something too. In the end, there is nothing but winners when parents act like this mother and children are raised in such a way. Yes, the times have changed, but some truths remain eternal.